Neither did I. But something had permanently shifted. Because once you know something is possible, you can't unknow it. A few weeks later, Caleb stood in the doorway again. This time he looked different. Stronger. More certain. "I'm leaving," he said. "I don't want to become something that hurts you." That sentence broke something inside me. Because he understood the situation more clearly than I had allowed myself to. This wasn't love. It was loneliness recognizing loneliness. Grief searching for comfort. Two people mistaking attention for salvation. Before he left, he said one final thing. "You deserve to be loved without hiding." That night, for the first time in years, I didn't pretend everything was fine. When Daniel came to bed, I didn't turn away. I didn't perform the quiet routine of pretending. Instead, I told the truth. I told him I was lonely. Not angry. Lonely. I told him I felt invisible. I told him I missed him. And to my surprise, he listened. Really listened. We didn't fix everything that night. We still haven't. But healing doesn't begin with perfection. It begins with honesty. Not with secret yes whispered in dark rooms. But with brave ones spoken in the light. I haven't spoken to Caleb in a long time. Sometimes I wonder where he is. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had answered that question differently. But then I remember something important. Temptation isn't about love. It's about unmet needs. And those needs don't disappear just because you run toward someone else. They follow you. Quietly. Patiently. Until you finally face them. And when you do, that's when real change begins. But when his fingers closed around mine, something changed. He didn't let go. And suddenly the air in the room felt different. Not romantic. Not exactly. Something deeper. Recognition. Two people standing inside different forms of emptiness. And then he asked the question. Quietly. Carefully. "If I told you what I really wanted, would you say yes?" The room seemed smaller suddenly. My heartbeat filled my ears. I should have asked what he meant. I should have stood up. I should have created distance. But loneliness has a persuasive voice. And validation becomes intoxicating when you haven't felt it in years. I didn't answer. But sometimes silence is an answer all by itself. He leaned closer. Not dramatically. Not like the movies. Just close enough that our breaths touched. And for one fragile moment, neither of us moved away. In that suspended second, something dangerous appeared. Not love, but the illusion of being chosen, of being seen, of being wanted. Then reality rushed back. Guilt arrived first. I pulled my hand away. He did the same. And neither of us spoke. Because once something unspoken becomes visible, pretending it doesn't exist becomes impossible. The next day Caleb avoided me. He left early. Returned late. The easy conversations in the kitchen disappeared. Daniel came home that evening. He kissed my cheek absent-mindedly and asked what we were having for dinner. And for the first time in years, I truly saw our marriage for what it had become. Two strangers performing a routine. Meanwhile, something real, messy and confusing, had briefly tried to grow in the cracks. Caleb never crossed another line. And I listened. Not because I had to, but because I understood something about loss too. The difference was that my loss had happened slowly. Over years. I had lost my husband long before he ever left the house. Over time, Caleb started lingering in the kitchen more often. Sometimes he leaned against the counter while I cooked dinner. Sometimes he sat quietly at the table, watching the rhythmic movements of chopping vegetables or stirring sauce. One evening he said something simple. "You make this house feel warm." It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't even a compliment meant to impress. It was an observation. But my heart reacted as if it had been starving. Because warmth was something I had been creating alone for years. Daniel rarely noticed it anymore. But Caleb did. And that small awareness began to matter more than I expected. Daniel didn't notice the change. Or maybe he did and trusted me too much to question it. Either way, I told myself the same thing over and over again. He's grieving. You're helping. This is kindness. This is safe. But kindness becomes complicated when you realize you're receiving something too. Attention. Eye contact. Presence. Caleb looked at me when I spoke. Not through me. Not past me. At me. and I had forgotten how powerful that could feel. The night everything shifted, another storm was passing through. Storms have a strange way of arriving during moments that can't be undone. Daniel was away on a business trip. The house felt unusually quiet. Caleb suggested watching a movie. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, leaving enough space between us to pretend there were boundaries we didn't need to discuss. Halfway through the film, there was a scene where a son lost his father. I felt Caleb move slightly beside me. He wasn't crying loudly. He was falling apart silently. Without thinking, I reached over and placed my hand gently on his. It was instinct. Human comfort. Nothing more. Caleb arrived on a Tuesday. He was 21. Young enough that life should have still felt wide open for him. But grief had already closed many doors. He stood in our doorway holding a worn duffel bag. His shoulders slightly hunched as if the world had become heavier overnight. His father had died 3 days earlier. A sudden heart attack. No warning. No preparación. One moment he was alive. The next moment he wasn't. Daniel had known Caleb's father since they were teenagers. They had grown up together, built their careers side by side, and remained close for decades. When the funeral ended and reality began settling in, Daniel insisted that Caleb stay with us for a while. Just until he figures things out, Daniel told me. He shouldn't be alone right now. And he was right. When Caleb stepped into our house that first evening, he looked like someone who had been pulled out of deep water, but still hadn't caught his breath. It was raining outside. The kind of steady rain that makes everything feel quiet and distant. His clothes were damp. His hair clung to his forehead. His eyes were red, but he refused to cry. I handed him a towel, showed him where the guest room was. Simple gestures. Ordinary kindness. But when he paused at the doorway and said softly, "Thank you for making this place feel less empty," something unexpected stirred inside me. It had been years since anyone had thanked me for something that small. At first, everything about Caleb's presence felt harmless. He spent most of his time quietly adjusting to his new reality. Some nights he stayed in his room. Other nights he wandered into the kitchen late in the evening where I would be making tea. We began talking. Not long conversations. Just small ones. About his father. About loss. About the strange way grief rearranges the world around you. He spoke carefully when he mentioned his father, like someone handling broken glass. But not necessarily something people examine closely. But it wasn't always like that. There was a time when Daniel looked at me as if I were something extraordinary. I remember nights in crowded restaurants where his hand would find mine under the table. His thumb would brush softly across my knuckles as if he needed the reminder that I was there. I remember laughter that came easily, naturally, without effort. Back then love felt alive. But ambition is a hungry thing. And Daniel was ambitious. At first, the changes were small. A few late nights at work. A few dinners postponed. A few mornings where he left before the sun rose. None of it seemed alarming. Success demands sacrifice, people say. And we believed that. But over time, ambition started taking more than we expected. First, it took the long dinners. Then the weekend mornings. Then the spontaneous moments that make a relationship feel alive. Eventually, even the small touches disappeared. And silence began to grow. Loneliness doesn't arrive dramatically. It doesn't knock loudly on the door. Instead, it seeps into the corners of your life. It sits across from you at dinner while your husband answers emails on his phone. It lies beside you in bed when he turns away without noticing the distance between you. It echoes through empty hallways when the sound of your own footsteps becomes the loudest thing in the house. At first you complain. You ask questions. You try to explain how you feel. But eventually something changes. You stop asking. Because asking begins to feel embarrassing. Like you're begging for something that should already exist. So you adjust. You become efficient. You keep the house organized. You prepare meals. You host gatherings. You smile when people expect you to smile. And slowly, quietly you begin to fade. And yet somehow it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff without realizing how far the fall could be. The truth is, I should have known something important in that moment. Some doors aren't meant to open. And sometimes a yes doesn't lead you forward. Sometimes it makes the entire structure of your life collapse behind you. From the outside, my life looked perfect. People love perfect-looking lives. They admire them. They envy them. They assume that happiness must live inside them. And if you had seen my life from the outside, you probably would have thought the same. The house was large enough that our footsteps echoed in certain hallways. The kind of house that looked beautiful in photographs and even better in holiday cards. The furniture was expensive, carefully chosen, the kind people compliment when they visit. We hosted dinner parties where the wine bottles were older than some of the guests. Crystal glasses caught the light. Laughter filled the room. Conversations flowed easily about business deals, vacations, and plans for the future. On social media, our life looked polished and effortless. Anniversary photos, vacation sunsets, smiling faces, the kind of images that convince people that love must live inside those walls. My husband, Daniel, was exactly the man people expected him to be. Successful, disciplined, respected by everyone who knew him. He was the kind of man who shook hands firmly and spoke with calm confidence. His colleagues admired him. His friends trusted him. His family relied on him. He built things, businesses, connections, a reputation that carried weight. And me? I was there. Present. That's the word I always come back to. Present. Like a carefully placed chair in a beautifully decorated room. Like a painting that completes a wall. Important enough to belong there. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Your support helps us share more powerful, emotional stories with people all around the world. Some stories don't arrive loudly. They don't crash through your life like a storm or announce themselves with obvious warning signs. Instead, they slip in quietly, like a whisper in a room you thought was empty. And the strange thing about whispers is that they stay with you longer than shouts. In today's story, we're talking about one of those moments. A moment that didn't look dangerous. A moment that seemed small enough to ignore. But it was the kind of moment that quietly split a life in two. Because sometimes a single question can change everything. And sometimes the most dangerous answer in the world is a simple yes. They say the moments that ruin you rarely announce themselves. They don't come with flashing lights or dramatic music. They don't warn you to stop or step away. Instead, they arrive quietly, almost politely, like a thought that slips into your mind when you're not paying attention. And before you realize it, everything you thought was solid begins to shift. It has been 2 years since that night. 2 full years since someone looked at me in a way no one had looked at me in a very long time. 2 years since a question was asked so softly that it almost disappeared into the silence between us. But the silence didn't swallow it. Instead, it stayed with me. Even now, sometimes late at night when the house is quiet and the world feels paused, I can still hear it. Not just the words, but the pause before them. The hesitation. The fragile courage it took to say them out loud. If I told you what I really wanted, would you say yes? Strange, isn't it? A question that simple. A question that small.